Now that we've seen how to add a little bit of drama by playing with the lighting effects here inside of Photoshop, let's take a look at how we can utilize Photoshop's blend modes to create a very nice high contrast portrait effect. So I'm going to close this image up here and I'm going to select Don't Save. I'm going to navigate back to the Adobe Bridge, and this time I'm going to come all the way down to the bottom and choose thomasegger.jpg. Now when I open this image up here, you can see it's a fairly decent photograph, but it's not really edgy enough, simply because of the fact that in magazines and brochures and things like that, you're always seeing these really high contrast, gritty type photographs that everybody uses in their design. So what we're going to do is we're going to create that in a very easy way. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to duplicate this layer by using Command or Control J on my keyboard. And then I'm also going to duplicate it one more time by hitting Command or Control J again. Now I'm going to turn off this top layer first so that we can only see the bottom two layers. Then I'm going to select layer 1 and I'm going to desaturate this layer by using Shift Command U on the Mac, Shift Control U on the PC. And I'm going to change this layer's blend mode to overlay. And what that's going to do is just create this nice dark and gritty image here. And the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to brighten it up a little bit by activating this top layer and changing its blend mode to screen. So there you see we get that nice high contrast effect overall on the total image. Now when you switch this blend mode to screen, you might find that you get too many hotspots and that the image itself is a little too bright. If that's the case, come up here and just adjust your opacity to kind of tone that down a little bit. I'm going to tone this one down maybe to about 85%, just because I'm getting some hotspots in the highlights right here on his cheeks. And then what we're going to do next is we're going to combine all of these into a smart object. So what we're going to do is we're going to shift click all of these to select all of them there. That would be shift click on the PC, or you could command click each one of them individually on the Mac. And what we're going to do is we're going to combine them into a smart object by coming up here to the filter menu, and we'll choose convert for smart filters. That's just another way of creating a smart object here inside of Photoshop, and it's going to come up and say to enable re-editable smart filters, the selected layer will be converted into a smart object. That's totally fine. You don't want to see that each and every time that you use this command, so go ahead and say don't show again, because all that's really saying is that it's going to convert all these into a smart object, and that's totally fine. No big deal there. So we'll go ahead and click OK now. And once we get into this smart object now, we're going to start adding a little bit of noise and even a little bit of grain to make this photograph look a little bit more edgy. So we're going to come up here to the filter menu. We're going to choose noise, and we're going to choose add noise. Now inside of the noise dialog box, we want to make sure that we have Gaussian selected, and then we also have monochromatic selected. That way we avoid all of the color halos and different things like that we get with those. So then we're going to come in here and we're going to tone down the amount just a little bit. So I'm going to take this amount down maybe to about 8 or 9%. And once I get that down, maybe even 7.5 would probably be good for this particular image, simply because it's a lower resolution file, so we don't want to add in too much noise, because then we'll run into pixelation problems and stuff like that. So I'll go ahead then and I'll click OK. And so what we need to do now, if we find that this is a little too noisy, which it really is for me a little too noisy, what we can do is change the blend mode of this, and we can change the blend mode to overlay. Like so. And when we do that, we get an even more high contrast effect with that, but we have all of that noise right in here giving us that kind of gritty texture to the overall photograph. And then what we're going to do is we're going to adjust the opacity and tone that back to about 75%, like so. I'm going to go ahead then, I'm going to click OK. And the last thing we're going to do is we're going to add some grain to this. And we're not going to do that by running a smart filter on this. We're actually going to create a new layer in order to do this. We're going to create a new layer by clicking the new layer icon there. We're going to fill this layer with white. So we're going to switch our foreground color to white by hitting the X key on our keyboard. We're going to fill it with white using Option Delete or Alt Backspace on our keyboard. Then we're going to come up here to the filter menu, and this time we're going to come down to texture, and we're going to select grain. Now inside the grain dialog box, you want to make sure that you have the vertical grain type selected. And then you're going to also increase the intensity quite a bit. We're going to push that up probably to about 70. And then we can also take the contrast up as well. It's a little different in the grain dialog box. To increase contrast, you have to drag the slider to the left, which is a little bit different than you would think. You would think to increase, you would take it forward, but instead you have to take it backwards. It's just one of those little quirks that they have in the program that I really don't understand. But nonetheless, just drag it to the left to increase, drag it to the right to decrease. Go ahead, then we'll click OK. And there's our grain layer right there. And what we're going to do also is we're going to add a layer mask to this. And we're going to do that by clicking the new layer mask button down here in the layers panel. Then we're going to make sure our foreground color and background color are set to black and white. You can do that by hitting the D key on your keyboard. We're going to come back up to the filter menu, making sure that we have that layer mask selected. We're going to choose Render, Clouds. Now when I do that, you'll see there that it varies up the amount of grain simply because those clouds contain different areas of black and white, which allows the grain to be applied in different regions, which just gives us a little bit more of a random type effect. Now the last thing we're going to do is we're going to come down here and we're going to change the blend mode of this layer to soft light, like so, and you see there we get those nice little grainy lines throughout certain portions of his face. Almost makes it look like kind of a worn out type photograph. This is great for like those grungy advertisements and different things that you see all the time nowadays in the photography world.